Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with coverage of round 9 of the 2020-2021 Candidates Tournament. Round 8 was played 390 days after round 7 because of the Corona pandemic, but it was worth the wait. It was a very exciting round 8 with 2 decisive games. Caruana and Kyrianco won. The link to my video where I cover all 4 games is up here. And these were the standings after round 8, the first game in the second half of the tournament. Jan Nepomniachtchi is now the sole leader with 5 out of 8. Caruana and Vachier-Lagrave are half a point behind. Gyri and Wang Hao are on 50%. Grischuk and Kyrianco on -1. And Ding is at the bottom of the table with 3 points from 8 games. Round 9 was played on Tuesday, the 20th of April, and we saw Kyrianco against Caruana, Grischuk Nepomniachtchi, Gyri Wang Hao and Ding Liren against Vachier-Lagrave. The first game to finish was the all-Russian clash between Alexander Grischuk with the white pieces and tournament leader Jan Nepomniachtchi on the black side. Let's see what happened. Let's put the opening on the board. It is a Grunfeld defense, one of Nepomniachtchi's specialties. And we see one of the main lines. And on move 9, which is at this moment, Grischuk brings a novelty. H2, H3, and Grischuk explained after the game that this is a novelty at top level. It had only appeared in some amateur games. Knight c6, and with d5 Grischuk sacrifices a pawn. Actually, we saw white sacrificing material in 3 of the 4 games today. Very exciting. Nepomniachtchi took the pawn. With check to the king, bishop interposed, take, and now knight d4. Nepomniachtchi is giving back the pawn straight away. Knight takes, c takes, and Grischuk can take back on d4, but he didn't. Bishop c4 and now e5, castling and queen d6. g5 is possible here, as Alexander Grischuk showed in the press conference after the game, to stop the f2, f4 move from white. Nepomniachtchi said that this move never crossed his mind. But he had to admit that was indeed a decent option for black. Nepomniachtchi was worried that he would get checkmated, weakening his kingside position. But queen d6 was played instead of g5. f4 came now, that move is possible. Rook b8, and this is a critical moment, said Grischuk. Queen b4 is an option here, but f takes e5, queen takes d5, and queen f4, the queen going the other way, was played in the game. The queens came off the board and rook e8. Nepomniachtchi said this was the only dangerous moment. If white gets e5 and d6 in, then it will get ugly. Grischuk said this is either clearly better for white or not better at all. It's hard to get some in-between situation. Bishop b5 was white's choice. Rook d8, rook b2 f1, doubling up on the half-open f-file. Bishop d7. That's attacking the bishop, so you don't have time to take on f7 because then you lose that bishop. So after bishop d7, Grischuk played bishop c4. And now Nepomniachtchi showed afterwards that you can play bishop e8 to protect the f7 pawn. And then they give this variation, e5, pushing the central pawns, b5, bishop b3, a5 and d6. And this is good for white, was the conclusion from the players. So in this position after bishop c4, bishop e8 is not a great move. Rook b2 c8 was Nepomniachtchi's choice. Attacking the bishop brought back, and bishop b5. Attacking the rook on f1, so the rook went to f2, a5, and now you can take on f7, which is the alternative to the move from the game, which also should lead to an equal position, was the conclusion in the post-mortem. In the game after a5, Grischuk played d6. Bishop c4, and if you now take on c4, that leads to an easy draw. So Grischuk decided to spin the roulette wheel, as he called it, and he took on f7 instead. Rook takes f7 was the move from the game. Now you can take back on f7 with the bishop. It wasn't played, but it's a good alternative for black. This variation was shown. Rook takes f7, and then a4, kicking the bishop. Bishop d5, and here was a funny moment. The move here is d3, and the game should end in a draw. But Nepomniachtchi blundered here in the analysis, and he played rook c1 check. Because the refutation is very simple, rook f1 check. and that is check to the king and attacking the unprotected rook on c1. 1-0, said Grischuk, and then Pomnishi said, it's good to know. A funny moment. King g7, rook takes c1, and white has an extra piece. So where were we? We were on rook takes f7 on move 26, and we just saw that bishop takes f7 is a good alternative to the move from the game, which was taking on b3. A takes b3, and now we have a drawn rook endgame. Not so much more to talk about, let's just see how this finished. The balance was never broken. At this level, this is an easy draw. Let's just play out the moves. The game was drawn on move 41, and there was hardly anything left. 2 pawns on the king side and 2 rooks. And this is move 40, rook f7, rook e4, and the players shook hands. Not a good result for Grischuk. He really needs to start winning games to have a chance to qualify to be Magnus Carlsen's next challenger. For Nepomniachtchi, a draw with the black pieces is a good result. He consolidates his position at the top of the table. The second game to finish was Anish Giri with the white pieces against Wang Hao on the black side. Here we see Wang Hao having a sip of his water. Giri is walking around. And the opening was a Catalan. Let's put the opening moves on the board. We go to move 9. All standard stuff. And here white wins the pawn back. As I said in the other 3 games, white sacrificed material in the opening. World champion Magnus Carlsen said in the Chess24 broadcast that he was not surprised that there was one white player who had not sacrificed material, which was Anish Giri. Giri stays true to his style, remarked the world champion. Let's put more moves on the board. And we go to move 20. Material was swapped. C takes d4 and rook takes d4 and rook a d8. Here queen b5 was looked as an alternative, but a move from the game was rook takes d8, and now an interesting moment. Here it makes a lot of sense to recapture with the rook, right? But Wang Hao took with the queen. And Giri asked him after the game, why did you not take with the rook? Wang Hao said, I was worried about queen b5, and then queen c7 and knight c4, and Wang Hao did not like that. He is in danger of losing this a5 pawn. He said, I don't have time to play knight d5, and indeed, this move is not good because of knight takes d5. Don't take with the rook, because then we have a checkmate on the board. But even e takes d5 is not good here, because he can just take that pawn. And that's why in this position Wang Hao took back with the queen. Bit clumsy, but he felt it was necessary. Rook d1, developing that rook with a tempo on the queen, and queen a8. And it was Grandmaster Yassasarawan in the St. Louis broadcast who said, what's that queen doing on a8? Was that queen not on b6 a short while ago? Giri said, it's not that bad, it's quite solid. My queen cannot go to f3 and b5 at the same time, and I didn't see how to put pressure on. So even though it looks very bad, that queen in the corner, it is not so bad after all. King g1, getting out of any discovered attacks from that queen on a8. Knight b4, now queen b5, knight b to d5, those knights were swapped, and rook c1. Giri said, here I don't have much, if anything at all. And Daniel Dubov in the official broadcast from FIDE Chess explained that we have a symmetrical pawn structure with white's pieces being better placed than black's. Instead of rook c1, knight c4 is also an option, and then b6, knight takes, queen takes, and rook b8 was a variation that was looked at in the post-mortem. And Giri said, this is fine for black, despite being a pawn down, because my king is weak. So black has compensation for the pawn in this queen and rook endgame because of the somewhat weakened position of the white king. Back to the game. Rook c1 on move 25, and h6 was played here. And as Grandmaster Maurice Ashley explained in the St. Louis broadcast, white has the more active pieces, but this advantage will disappear when black will be successful in trading them off. Will black be able to do that? Queen d7, knight f6, queen d6, and now g7, g6, which doesn't look that bad of a move, but it is a bad move. It is weakening the king side, and also Wang Hao got low on time here, while Giri had a lot of time on the clock. Black should have played a waiting move, for example queen e8, but that is not easy to do for a human player. Knight d5 doesn't work either, because then there is f5, as Wang Hao pointed out. So it turned out g6 was a terrible move, which is not very obvious at all. The game went on, b3, h5, let's put more moves on the board. White is getting into a winning position. A takes b4 and rook c4. Nice play from Giri. White wants to take with the rook on b4. Don't think you can defend it with knight d5. You can't defend the b4 pawn that way because we have a discovered attack. Knight c6 check or knight d7 check is a check on the king and it costs you the queen. So after rook c4, Wang Hao played b3. Rook b4, he still wants to take the pawn with the rook. Queen a7, there goes the pawn. Queen takes a4 and rook takes b7, which is now threatening the f7 pawn with two pieces. And this shows indeed that black's king's position is weak. You cannot defend the pawn with rook f8 because then there is the nice move knight d7, and because of the pin on the knight on f6, this is a winning move for white. So what to do after rook takes b7? Queen e8 was Wang Hao's move, and you can take on f7 here. Queen takes, knight takes and king takes. They should be winning, but Giri did not go for this as he was worried that this was a fortress for black. But many of the other grandmasters that I listened to did not think so. But you don't have to hurry. After queen e8 there is no need to take on f7 straight away. Rook a7 was Giri's move. And if you now play rook b8, then it's a very nice move queen c2, which is threatening. Queen takes g6. The f-pawn is pinned, and also rook takes f7. Easy win for white. So what to do after rook a7? Rook d5 was Wang Hao's choice. Queen came also on the 7th rank. Knight e4 and knight takes f7, and here Wang Hao resigned. Knight g5 check is coming, and the engine is on plus 13 for white. A big win for Giri, who now is also in contention to win the tournament. Grandmaster Daniil Dubov summarized this game very well. He said the theme was slowly but surely. The third game to finish was the game between yesterday's winners. Kirill Alexienko with the white pieces against Fabiano Caruana, and here we see Maxime Vachier-Lagrave looking at the board, checking what opening was played. e4 from Alexienko, another white for him. He starts the second half of the tournament with two whites. e5, and we are going to put the opening on the board again. We have a Giocco piano, and let's go to move 10. d4 and now knight c6. Caruana said after the game, Alexienko was well prepared. I knew that d4 and then knight c6 is decent for black, but I could not remember or had not analyzed white's next move, a2, a4, so I tried to get some stability. And with a4, white sacrifices a pawn, another sacrifice from white in the opening. After a5, bishop a2, black took a pawn. E takes, knight c4, d takes c3, knight takes b6, and now it is too dangerous to take on b2, because after bishop b2 this looks indeed not playable for black. Caruana said that he had not considered taking on b2 for that reason. White's bishops are monsters. What he did do after knight takes b6 is play c2. That's a grandmaster move. It's luring the queen to c2, to a square where I can attack it with knight b4 later. Very instructive. C takes b6. White has two beautiful bishops against a fractured black pawn structure. Caruana said this looks dangerous for black, but white also has some problems coordinating. Bishop d2. Alexienko felt that he had some initiative for the pawn. Bishop e6. That bishop was swapped. Queen b3. Attacking the e6 pawn. And queen e7 is the most natural square for the queen, as Caruana explained, but this is not a good move because of queen takes b6, and now I don't have knight d7 kicking the queen, because now white can take on b7. And we'll see that in the move played in the game, queen e8, queen takes b6, winning the pawn back. This was played in the game, and then knight d7. This is now possible, because if you now take on b7, there is knight c5, and black will happily sacrifice an exchange on f3. That is one of the options. Alexienko showed this variation, queen c7 and then rook d8, followed by rook f7 to b7, and Alexienko said, my queen is trapped. Although the engine shows that the queen is not trapped, but this is not something that the player would go for, getting the queen in so much trouble there. So let's go back. We had knight d7, and taking on b7 is not good now, so queen e3 was played, bringing the queen back. e5, now black is over the worst of it, said Caruana. It looks very solid for black all of a sudden. Alexienko said, here I started to worry about my position. So is black taking over here? Queen d3, nice queen maneuvering from Alexienko. In 4 moves the queen goes from c2 to b3, takes a pawn on b6, back to e3 and now to d3. Queen e6, knight h4, knight c5, queen g3, the king went to h7, rook ad1, and you can take that pawn on a4, but Caruana played g5. And after knight f3 he played rook f7. Caruana said, here I felt I had a large advantage. Rook f7 is a nice way to coordinate the rooks for black. Yes, said Alexienko, rook f7 was very strong. It was not easy to find a good move for white. And Caruana said, my way to play for an advantage here is to take on a4, take that pawn. Bishop c1 was played, and now knight takes a4 is a move. Caruana said, I did not do this as I did not want the white knight to get to g4 through h2. That way, when white will get some coordination. But then he said, after knight h2, black can play knight c5. Just go back to c5 and claim that I have an extra pawn, said Caruana. So maybe he should have taken on a4 after bishop c1, but he doubled the rooks first. Queen g4, the queens were swapped, and rook f6. Now taking on a4 is not good in this position because of rook takes d6. And that's why rook f6 was played, to protect the d6 pawn. Bishop e3, and finally Caruana chose to take on a4. Rook d5. Caruana said it's very difficult to handle white's activity here. A draw already seems logical. He took on b2, is now temporarily 2 pawns up. Rook c1. White indeed gets a lot of activity. Let's put the next number of moves on the board. Rook c4 and knight c5. That was a move repetition, but Caruana deviates. He does not want a draw yet. But now a lot of material comes off. Bishop takes, d takes, rook e7, knight takes e5, and lots of captures on that e5 square. This is move 40, the time control has been reached. Rook a6 was played by Caruana, and b6 was a suggestion from Anish Giri, but Caruana did not believe in it. It will take forever to push my pawns, Caruana said. So rook a6 was his 40th move, and this is a drawn rook endgame. Rook takes b7, a4 and f3. Caruana said this is a draw with almost every move, and let's see how this game finished up in a draw. It still looks quite complicated, but both players played it faultlessly. The black king goes pawn hunting while the white e-pawn runs up the board. Here Alexienko sacrifices his rook, which of course cannot be taken because then a new queen will appear on e8. So rook e8 and a few more moves. And now white has to sacrifice the rook for the pawn, and king takes g2. That was the last move of the game, because white will pick up the h-pawn. A hard-fought draw, and it looked to me that Caruana in the press conference was slightly disappointed. But a draw with black is not a bad result for him. The last game to finish, and it lasted a very long time, was Ding Liren with the white pieces against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. d4 from Ding, knight f6 from Vachier-Lagrave, a second black game in a row to start this second half of the tournament for the Frenchman. And he had a tough start, losing the first game. Let's see what happened. E takes d5, and you can take back with the c-pawn, but in this position Ding took with the e-pawn. knight bd7, and let's put some more moves on the board. Let's go to move 15, and that is some move is well worth waiting for. Knight g to e5, and now look at this one. Knight f3 to d4. What a move, a piece sacrifice. And for the second day in a row, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave has to deal with a piece sacrifice and with a lot of preparation from his opponent. He took the piece, c takes d4, and now he returns the piece straight away by castling, giving the piece back. Of course, we have to see what happens after knight f7, saving the piece. Black is a piece up. Vachier-Lagrave showed this variation, rook e1. Ding said later that he would have started with queen c2, but let's look at rook e1 and follow Vachier-Lagrave's variation. Then he would have castled, bishop d3, attacking the queen. The rook is attacking the queen, so queen d8, queen f3, and then knight h6, followed by rook f7, knight f8. And Vachier-Lagrave came to the conclusion that hanging on to the piece is too dangerous. So he was right to give the piece back straight away by castling. Ding took on e5. And let's keep going, because this game will last 88 moves. Let's play to move 28. Rook b2 and knight c5, and now Ding is making a few simple trades to get a big advantage in the endgame. Somehow, somewhere, things went wrong for Vachier-Lagrave, because after bishop takes f5, queen takes f5, bishop takes c5, don't take with the b pawn, because then your rook is hanging. So in this position you have to take with the d pawn, which means you have a weak b pawn. And now queen e2 on move 31. Something went wrong for black. His pawn on b6 is weak, e5 is weak, h6 is weak, and black's king does not have any pawn protection. It's a winning position for white. White has a protected pass pawn on d5. Great winning chances, and as said, some grandmasters even said this is completely winning for white. Let's see what happens. We'll see some drama. Here on move 37, rook d2 should have been played, said Ding after the game, and then it's close to winning for white. But he played d5, d6, and this is a blunder, a big mistake. Ding had missed rook e6. And after d7, rook d6, rook takes, queen takes, rook e4, he had missed that now black can take with a rook on d7. He had missed that in his calculations many moves ago. Because if black would have been forced to take with the queen, then there is rook e6, and that is winning for white. But with rook takes d7, the position is holdable for black. White is still better, and Ding pushed for a long time. King h2 to unpin the rook, and let's keep going. The first time control was reached, and Ding kept trying and trying, but MVL is a very tenacious defender. For the second time in a row he had to play the longest game of the round. There was a lot of disappointment yesterday that he was not able to keep that endgame to a draw, but this time he made it. Move 60, the second time control is reached, and Ding kept playing on, kept trying. But he was not able to breach black's defense. Lots of move repetitions, as you'll see. And we'll see that the rooks will get swapped right here. And now we have a queen endgame. 4 pawns against 4 pawns, and this is not winnable for white. Ding tried till the end, but here he saw that he can make no more progress, and after 88 moves, king e2 was the last move of the game. And MVL was very relieved to chalk up half a point. Ding understandably looked very disappointed in the press conference. So these are the results of round 9, 3 draws and a win from Gyri against Wang Hao, which leads to the following standings. Jan Nepomniachtchi is still leading the candidates tournament with 5 rounds to go. We have 3 players now breathing down his neck: Caruana, Vachier-Lagrave and Gyri. 3 players, Grischuk, Wang Hao and Kyrianco on 4 points, and they really need a miracle, being 1.5 points behind the leader with only 5 rounds to go. And we can say that Ding's challenge to become Magnus Carlsen's next opponent is all but over. Round 10 will be played on Wednesday the 21st of April and we'll see Caruana against Ding Liren, Vacheda Graf against Giri, those are 2 players in contention, that's a big game. Wang Hao against Grischuk and Pomnishi against Alexienko. I will be here after the round to tell you what happens. I hope you liked this video and that if you did you'll give it a thumbs up, that you subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel and that you leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you liked the video it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.